We are Penn State. It's the famed cheer of the Nittany Lions. But what if I told you that for almost half of their regional campuses, that will no longer be true? Penn State University has announced closing 7 of their regional campuses throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So what went into that decision, and what will the impact be in Pennsylvania and across the country? We're joined by Wyatt Massey. He's an investigative reporter from Spotlight PA who has been covering the Penn State situation closely, and he's going to join us to break down those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. Penn State University, the largest university in enrollment in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, famously in State College at University Park, the famous plain white and blue uniforms of the football team, the We Are Penn State cheers, the Creamery, the Nittany Lion. It is, to many people, a cult in the state of Pennsylvania, but for those who belong, a proud one. But the university announced recently that they are lining up to close 7 regional campuses. So what went into this decision and where will this leave the university? We're joined by Wyatt Massey. He is an investigative reporter from Spotlight PA. He's been covering this extensively. Wyatt, welcome to Face the Issues.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's great for you to have you here, Wyatt. Let's just jump into this. There are 20 Penn State campuses, including University Park and World Campus, which is online, not including the Pennsylvania College of Technology, which is affiliated but not really governed by Penn State. So 18 regional campuses and 7 are closing. I mean, this is nearly half of the regional campuses they're closing. They are aiming to close Dubois, Fayette, Mount Otto, New Kensington, Shenango, Wilkes-Barre, and York. You've covered this extensively. What has at least the reason given to the public for this decision?
Yeah, so the decision is kind of the result of a confluence of multiple factors. So in recent years, there's been a pretty intense focus on Penn State's overall budget and cutting costs and sort of balancing that budget, which includes the statewide campus system. So there's that happening. The statewide campus system has had a lot of challenges with enrollment. There's been a declining enrollment over the last 10, 15 years. And then for specific locations, that decline has been much larger than at others. And then the third big factor that Penn State has talked about is this coming demographic cliff. So essentially that, in Pennsylvania and across the country, the number of young people who are going to be entering that sort of prime college age, graduating high school, looking to go into college as a sort of traditional student, the number of young people is going to fall off. People have not had as many kids, so there's just going to be a bigger challenge to kind of hit those enrollment figures that the university projects it needs, because enrollment is one of the few revenue sources that universities like Penn State has. So those were the sort of factors Penn State has been grappling with. These aren't necessarily new problems that popped up this semester, but they've definitely been talked about a lot more in recent years, and especially this past semester when the university announced that it was reviewing some of its campuses for possible closure. So of that 20, they had said that 12 were sort of under review, and then we got the decision in late May that it was going to be those 7 that will be closed after May of 2027.
And to your point, why? This is not even just a Penn State issue. In Pennsylvania alone, across the country, we see programs, departments being closed, and then universities merging. And we saw that with Cabrini College and then Rosemont College in Pennsylvania. So Penn State is just another one. It's not like this is unique to them. Let me ask you about you said they looked at 12 schools. How did they come to choose those 7? Was there something about those specific 7 that stood out? Obviously, we know they are not closing University Park, right? Like, that's a given. The World Campus is going to stay open. But why those 7?
Yeah, so based on our reporting, we got access to some internal records from the university, and those sort of laid out the factors or the criteria that they were looking at while they were doing this months long review of the campuses. So we know that the most important criteria that they were weighing were the enrollment projections, the local population that sort of surrounds the campus. Like, is that a community that's growing? What's the number of young people? The viability of the student experience at those
Mm.
campuses. And then, so those are the kind of the most important factors. And then the other factors that we know they were at least considering in deciding which campuses to close was the geographic location. Are there other universities and colleges that are close that we're competing with? What's the availability of on-campus housing at these locations? As well as the financial performance, and then the maintenance that's needed to upkeep those locations.
So very much a financial decision.
It was partially a financial decision. The university will say publicly that was a factor, but not the driving factor. The enrollment, the sort of projected enrollments for those were sort of the biggest ones. Because if you look at the 7 that were closed or are slated to close, those are among the lowest enrolled locations, as well as the ones that have had kind of the biggest declines in enrollment over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, the president, Neeli Bendapudi, stated that enrollment has dropped 43% in the last 10 years in just those 7 campuses. Why, you mentioned earlier in your investigative reporting, you requested, or Spotlight PA have requested internal records. Was there a difference between what we saw from Penn State internally versus what they had said publicly in their statements?
Yeah, so we we were given internal records. We aren't necessarily able to ask Penn State for records. That's sort of give with their basically their exemption from the open records law.
Okay.
But so those factors were really important in our reporting on this, because it provides some insight into what the university was thinking as it was weighing those decisions. And I will say that we had gotten access to those records, and we had approached Penn State to say hey, we're gonna do a story about this. The factors that went into this decision, and this was before the vote happened. Okay. So before the board's public vote, the list of campuses had been leaked to the Philadelphia Inquirer. Not long after that, we had gotten access to these internal records. We, as we always do, we went to Penn State for comment to say, hey, this is the story we're looking to publish. Here's kind of our questions. Here's what we are going to say in the story. If you'd like to comment on any of it, all of it, none of it. And during that, Penn State asked for an extension of time to get back to us. We granted it for later in the afternoon. That afternoon, we did publish our story, but by then, part of the records that we had gotten this report was provided to other news outlets, and then that evening, Penn State published it in full. The university said that it had planned to make this report public after the vote. Would they have done so without us reporting on it? I don't know. But that report was really important because it broke down for each of the 12 campuses under consideration. It had sort of a paragraph or a page outlining, for campus A, we are recommending that we continue to invest in it for XYZ reasons. And then campus B, we're recommending that we close this for XYZ reasons. So it provided a lot of transparency into their thinking about which campuses are viable and which campuses they no longer seemed as viable for the university.
You mentioned about open records and Penn State being exempt from that, but they're not exempt from the Sunshine Act. And there's been some controversy, some debate about how these meetings took place, whether they were done in secret, and whether that's a violation of the Sunshine Act. For our viewers' purpose, can you explain what the Sunshine Act is and what the role would be here with Penn State's decision?
Yeah, I mean, so I should say at the beginning, I'm not a lawyer, just a journalist. But the Sunshine Act, or a more common name for it, would be the Open Meetings Law. So basically, that law says that governing bodies like Penn State's like your borough council, township council, they need to conduct business in public view with some very limited exceptions. But in order for them to take action, that has to be done in public so the public can see, take part in the decision-making process and understand what's happening. So we at Spotlight have written a number of stories raising some concerns about the board's practices around this. For example, for more than a decade, there was this committee of top university officials that were meeting privately in order to set board agendas. And there was no public disclosure. Those meetings weren't public. And that matters because what's on the agenda is what gets discussed, what gets voted on at the public meetings. And in conjunction with these meetings for the campus closures, we know that the board held 2 executive sessions in the month of May that totaled about 4 hours. So those executive sessions, the public did not have access to those. But under the open meetings law, boards like Penn State's can hold these private executive sessions for certain reasons. For example, if you're looking to buy real estate, discussing that sort of contract, you want a bit of confidentiality in those talks. So the board had cited a number of exemptions in order to have these hour-long discussions and answer trustee questions about this closure plan before the public vote. And that had raised some concerns just because with the records that we had gotten and some conversations like, why aren't these meetings happening in public? We had spoken to some lawyers as well as transparency advocates that sort of mentioned, like, given the weight of this decision, as well as kind of that information, like, shouldn't these conversations be happening in public? And I will say that the board's public vote, that meeting lasted about 2 hours with a little over an hour of deliberation, which was more than typical for this board. But sort of if you take it in conjunction with those 4+ hours behind closed doors, there can be some concerns about how transparent the university was during this process.
Yeah. Do you expect anything to come of that?
I don't know. There is a limited time frame if someone were to want to challenge those meetings. That's obviously a space we're monitoring. Spotlight PA, in conjunction with the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, did file a lawsuit against the Board of Trustees back in December of 2023 for alleged violations of the Sunshine Act. That case is ongoing. It's not in conjunction with these recent meetings, but it's sort of similar in the allegations around the Sunshine Act and open meetings.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, we're going to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about what comes next for Penn State and what people can expect. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device or go to our website for more information. Visit lighthousetv.org to stay connected. There you can find out what's currently on the air and coming up, how to watch in your area on cable, satellite, broadcast, or streaming devices. Watch past programs or our live stream. Follow us on social media and learn more about the station, our hosts, and our programming. Lighthouse TV, positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Wyatt, thank you again for joining us. I want to, before we get into kind of what comes next, in that vote, it was pretty overwhelming. It was 25-8, but there were 8 trustees that voted no. Did they provide any reasoning as to why they were against this?
Yeah, you're right. So the 8 votes, it was not a unanimous decision. Based on some of the previous analysis we've done of the trustees' voting patterns, getting 8 trustees to oppose a university proposal is a pretty big deal. But 25 trustees did vote in favor of this. The trustees that voted no were pretty united in their view that something had to change with Penn State's campuses, but they didn't necessarily want closure of those. They were worried or wanted to, maybe consider third options rather than keep open as is or close. And the other common critique they had was just wanting more time to consider this proposal or like what could happen to these campuses before voting to say no. And that came up because when it was first announced in February that the administration was considering these campuses for closure, the president made a statement at the time that really indicated that the decision, whether to keep the campus open or to close was going to be hers and hers alone. I mean, there were some questions about like, well, is Penn State's governing body going to have any say in this? And that wasn't really cleared up until April when it became clear that actually the board was going to approve this closure plan. And I think that led to some of the trustee pushback in terms of, like, why rush such a weighty decision? Like they used the word rush in getting a sense of like, if we should take more time before we have this vote that can have such a big deal on the students, the employees, et cetera.
Yeah. So where does this go now? Because they've proposed it, it's the trustees have passed it, but it's not a done deal. As a state institution, Penn State, there are other strings here that are attached. So where does this go now?
Yeah, so the university does have to submit their plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Education for approval. So that still has to happen. Governor Josh Shapiro has made some statements essentially saying like he is supportive of letting Penn State do what it thinks it's best. So does that mean the Department of Education will approve it? I don't know. That's kind of still an open question, but given that they probably will, I think the plan will move forward. To my knowledge, the General Assembly doesn't really have a direct say in this decision, although they do have sort of an indirect role to play in approving the annual appropriation that goes to Penn State each year to help subsidize in-state tuition.
Yeah, and that's the difference between the state system, right? Like Millersville, Kutztown, East Stroudsburg, and then schools like Penn State that they're not part of that system, but they do get a bulk of their funding from the state. There have been some state reps and senators who in their districts have had these proposed closings that are threatening to vote down any budget. Is that something that Penn State is concerned about? Do they think that's a serious enough threat?
Yeah, so you're right in a number of those state lawmakers making those statements, and we are in budget season. We're kind of always in budget season, but we're especially in budget season now. But based on the records that we have reviewed, Penn State does not anticipate there being much political or financial fallout from this decision. But that's sort of an open question. I mean, like the legislature does have to approve this annual appropriation for Penn State. It is, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Will some vote against the appropriation? Maybe. Will it be enough to sink it or make a huge difference? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, politicians can make statements, but when it comes time to vote, how are they going to come down?
Right.
Who knows?
Right. So what happens from here then? So what happens to those campuses? I mean, because they're not slated to close tomorrow, right? So through 2027. So then what happens to those campuses? I mean, some are predetermined, right? Mont Alto, by law, has to go back to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. It's not a forestry school anymore. But I'm just hearing a lot of economic development groups saying, "Oh, we could use York for this, or we could use, Kensington for this." I mean, the property's still Penn State's, right? Like, who gets a say? Do we have any idea what's going to happen to those properties?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say just sort of watch that space. So the board, what they approved was the closure of the campuses, not necessarily what comes next. And we don't have a ton of details, like how the transfer process is going to happen for students and employees beyond some kind of general principles. And then for each of those campuses, sort of the decision to close them now starts, in Penn State's mind, starts the conversation about what happens next. Okay. So the board didn't necessarily approve anything about what happens to the York location in June 2027. So those conversations are sort of starting now, if they hadn't been started sooner. for the roughly 500 or so employees at these locations, our understanding is that tenured faculty will be able to have positions elsewhere in Penn State, and then staff and non-tenured faculty will be given priority to be rehired at other locations or within the Penn State sort of ecosystem as long as they meet some qualifications. And then for the students, obviously some will graduate before that May 2027 deadline. And then for others, Penn State has indicated there will sort of be structures in place to help them transfer or to make sure that there isn't a huge change in their education. But I think the open question there is, with this announced closure, you have this 2-year runway, but at the same time, employees might be leaving before that. There might be big changes even before the closure. If you have a lot of faculty or staff saying I could stay with this job until May 2027, but now I have an opportunity somewhere else that's going to pay me, more, or at least will pay me past May 2027. So I think that could lead to some very big changes to the education that these students are getting, but that kind of remains an open question about the depth of that effect.
Yeah, you jump ship if you know that this one's sinking. I mean, I think there's also a challenge, like faculty, let's say someone's at York and they have a young family, and they get hired at University Park. I mean, that's fantastic, but you have to uproot really by no choice of your own. And so,
right. Or if you're at a Penn State Fayette in the southwestern part of the state, and you have another job at Penn State, but it's in Scranton.
Yeah,
that's a big change.
Yeah,
it is technically still a Penn State job. You're eligible for rehire, but are you willing to make that huge move?
Yeah, no, that's super fair. Why the President Ben DiPuti said that these campuses are being closed for quote traditional academic degrees. Is that a hint? I'm asking to speculate here. Is that a hint that Penn State may retain these campuses and try to do other? I mean, I teach at a community college where we do a lot of what we call non-credit courses, right? So courses in our community that are, people pay for them. It just doesn't come with credit. Is there any inclination that Penn State might try to do this, or is that all speculation right now?
I would say it's all speculation right now, just because we don't have a good idea of those things. I think there is an appetite for the kind of non-traditional education opportunities among some of the trustees. So there seems to be some support for those types of things, but at this point, to my knowledge, it's sort of all speculation, and those conversations are ongoing.
So really a wait and see. I mean, both if this plan gets finalized, and then if it does, what happens to those 7 locations?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. And we got in Penn State, the largest alumni network of any college in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I know a lot of people who bleed blue and white are watching and figuring out what the next steps are. So really, really appreciate your reporting on this, and also for joining us to break it down.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website lighthousetv.org for more information. Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. One of the things we always do on the show is we want to get to know our guests beyond the issues and the stuff that you do. So you're a journalist. You're not actually from Pennsylvania. You are from Wisconsin. But journalism's brought you to Tennessee. It's brought you to Pennsylvania. What got you into journalism? Like, why did you choose this as your path?
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in rural Wisconsin, and then went to college at Marquette University, which is in Milwaukee. I was always very interested in English, storytelling, history. And it was while I was at Marquette University that I learned about an alum of the university named James Foley. He was a journalist that was captured and killed by ISIS in the mid 2010s, and really learning about his mission and interest in journalism and telling stories to help understand the world and the challenges people face. Just like really motivated me to think about the impact of storytelling, the impact of fact finding and documenting things, and uncovering potential problems. And that really motivated me to take this interest in English and storytelling and writing, and like, can you use it as like a sort of applied science? And that's what got me into journalism. And then from there, the opportunity to kind of work at different places around the country. So before I was at Spotlight PA, I worked at the daily newspaper in Chattanooga covering faith and religion in what Chattanooga claims is the buckle of the Bible Belt, but a lot of places in the South take that moniker.
Oh, fair enough. Let me ask you this: in your career, what has been something that, as a journalist, that has brought you the most amount of joy?
Yeah, I think in doing journalism, and especially investigative journalism, one of the most rewarding things is telling people's stories and uncovering things, especially problems where the people affected are sort of given an opportunity to have like what they went through understood by others, or to uncover problems that find solutions to things, and then hearing that feedback from people who were affected by the wrongdoing, by the indirect fallout from policies and different things, and like getting that sort of feedback from people to say, thank you for helping uncover this or bringing more attention to it, because it requires a lot of trust and courage from those people to speak up. So being able to give something back to them is very rewarding.
Yeah. Same question, but outside of journalism, what's something from your life that's brought you the most amount of joy?
I love being outside, whether that's running, biking, playing with my dog, hunting. So anything outdoors, away from screens, is probably brings me the most joy in the day or weekend.
That's awesome. So, okay, our viewers are going to ask, what kind of dog do you have?
Black Lab mix.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate the work that you do day in and day out. I think that this kind of journalism, investigative journalism, is just so important for our country to work the way it does. And so really appreciate you doing that. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. That is our show for this evening. I want to thank Wyatt Matthew from Spotlight PA for his continued coverage on everything Penn State, for joining us to break down this issue. Hope to see you again here next week. Until then, my name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.